Perhaps the only thing scarier than the media we watch during this time of year is the fact that some of it is lost forever, some is just hard to find, and some just completely overlooked. This is I Have No Title, and I Must Podcast, show where we discuss any and all aspects of pop culture. We are your hosts, Tyler.
And Chris.
And our special guest host today,
Becca.
And as you probably guessed by now, we're continuing spooky season, talking more about horror films, but specifically this time around, we're talking about lost media, or just media that's hard to find, or some that people just don't talk about. Who would like to start us off?
I think we should let Becky start us off, because she probably is the most prepared and has the most to share.
That was my thinking, but I didn't want to call us out like that.
Well, in doing my research for this particular podcast, a lot of things that I thought had just weren't available. A lot of that stuff is out there now. Like, most stuff is out there. And so I kind of just shifted my focus to things that have maybe flown under the radar or that people may not have heard about, because I think a lot of people this time of year go for like the obvious hits and the franchise and the big blockbusters and things, but most of the things on my list are things that either flew under the radar or maybe people just didn't hear about or whatever. And so the first one I want to mention is Stigmata, which came out in 1999. It had Patricia Arquette was the main character. Gabriel Byrne was in it. And it's another one of those religious possession type stories. Those are kind of coming back into focus these days, but this one didn't get as much attention, I don't think, back in the day, but I always really liked it. And Patricia Arquette is a character who is not religious at all, doesn't have any interest in it, but she gets given this artifact and she just thinks it's cool, so she's wearing it, and then she starts to experience things that basically invoke the stigmata, which are the wounds of Christ. And
while he was on the cross.
Yeah, while he was on the cross, like the crown of thorns thing, the nails, things like that. She begins to experience these wounds.
Which, if I could interject, in real life, what is said, as the legend goes, usually most people only get like one or two of the types, and it's usually like the palms, like you bleed from the palms,
will bleed,
or even sometimes something that's just tangentially connected, but not exactly one of his specific wounds. But if you start experiencing them in order, then it ends with the spear through the belly, which is technically what killed him, which is said to then kill you, which sounds like an old wives' tale, like like if you cross that bridge or say Beetlejuice 3 times, he might not be on your side. So that's in this version, I think she is experiencing them in order.
Sequential. Yeah, she's getting all the wounds. And Gabriel Byrne is sent by the church to investigate, why this is happening to her. And especially as a non-believer, because the stigmata usually comes as a spiritual attack to people who are very,
the most
St. Padre Pio, I think, is the most famous stigmatic, who is one of the Catholic saints. And it's usually, considered an attack on their faith. And if they hold strong to their faith, they will get these great blessings and they'll be able to heal other people and stuff. But in this case, she's someone who has no connection to any of this. And why is it happening to her? And what does it all mean? And it's a pretty interesting film. I think it's obviously that 90s era, but it's worth going and checking out if you haven't seen it and if that kind of thing appeals to you.
Yeah, I feel like Emily Rose gets all of its attention, which it deserves it too. But yeah, I remember going to see religious stuff freaks me out. There's a lot of people who are saying we have too many religious horror films right now. I've seen some. Well, I haven't watched the video essays, but I'm seeing them come up.
The Last Omen, Immaculate, all those things were out last year.
The Pope's Exorcist. I think there's 7 exorcism movies out within the past year or something. So I don't begrudge people for saying that's a trend that's gotten out of hand. But that's something that freaks me the out, I gotta tell you, to no end, because I'm some of this stuff is not completely debunked out there. There might be, I don't know what it is, some natural phenomena, or if it's real. I'm not going to get into that on here, but we do, aside from talking about this objective real thing, a movie that got made, we also sometimes like to speculate into the paranormal and supernatural at certain times during the year. And this is one of those things that there's a crossover. This is a movie. Some people get freaked out by, just watching Seven or whatever, seeing that one guy that's that was a special effect, right? No, that was a real guy. He's just emaciated and borderline a skeleton. And they're no way. That's not a real person. There's no way. And then you see him and you're like, I have to rethink my life and this world that I live in. That guy was real, maybe. I don't know. Willem Dafoe's real, and that's scary enough, I think. Like, I still think he's a possible cryptid and that he's been CGI his whole career. And it's like Wag the Dog or whatever that movie was with Al Pacino that there was an... It's Al Pacino, right? Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking. I made up. I think I might have just jumped realities, and you guys are Mandela affected. Anyway, what movie am I thinking of? There's like an AI. It was like back in the 90s before this was even possible. I'm not thinking of Blade Runner, but it's like Blade Runner. But like if Blade Runner was in the 90s and the guy had like an AI person, but I think they were projected to be real to the... You don't know what I'm talking about?
No.
What the Anyway, so religious stuff freaks me out because it's, like if you ask somebody on the street, and I sometimes do ask people at work, like there'll be a few moments of silence, we're working together, and I'm like, so aliens? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to press it. It's not like I have definitive evidence or I claim to have been abducted. And ghosts? Are you stupid? You believe in ghosts? I don't believe in them. I'm asking if you believe in them. And they're like, no. Why would I believe in a ghost? Okay. But if you get into religious stuff and you're like, but you believe in like the Holy Ghost, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I don't around with that. And like all this other stuff, you can find many more people who believe in that. So there's this mystique around some of these religious stories that are, it's like, I don't know if it's true or false. I don't know if there's aliens or ghosts. Like the government's admitted to aliens at this point. Nobody even cares anymore. And people are like, yeah, I don't believe that. You believe in Social Security though, don't you? And they're like, probably, yeah, but only for another 30 years. And that's being generous. So when it comes to these religious movies, there's, there's some weird stuff. The Vatican. This is a religion that keeps pieces of dead people at their church. By law, they have to. It's part of their thing. You have to have...
religious relics like blood of the saints. And
you have to have like a piece of a sainted person at a Catholic church. I'm not Catholic, and I don't know the full story about why they do this. I just know that they do this. And I'm also not judging. Don't come at me. I'm just saying, that's the thing. And if you're a Catholic and you're listening to this, go down in the comments and explain why this is a good thing. I totally accept it. I'm just saying, that's metal as okay? And there's something to that. And there's a lot of darkness involved with some of this stuff. Is stigmata real? Could be a placebo effect. Could be that you believe something so much that your body reacts to it and does weird things. There is at least, for every disease known to man, there is at least a documented case of it spontaneously healing through the, whether it's the placebo effect or what have you, that is documented, whether it was diagnosed incorrectly. I'm not saying what happened with it, if it was a miracle or if it was the body going into remission naturally and we just don't know why or whatever. I'm just saying the body is capable of things that we do not understand yet. Magic Johnson's alive, okay? That's magic. So, they say there's not a cure for AIDS. I'm just saying, they say there's not a cure for AIDS, but Magic Johnson has been living with AIDS for 76 years. I cannot square that circle. There is something else going on in this world and we are not privy to it. So, stigmata freaks me out, and if you have not seen it or heard of it, I would pair it with Emily Rose. If you're like you want to get scared this Halloween, you're not like the kind of fun, like, oh, I'm Tim Burton Halloween kind of person. You're like, no, I'm the darkness incarnate. I like to take minutes off my life by being scared too much. Well, this Halloween, get Emily Rose and Stigmata and do it up on a weekend with your girlfriend and have fun with that. What do you got? I just wanted to add into that because, Stigmata's... It doesn't seem like it would be scary, but it is. And it's like there's a bigger theme to it that extends in... That is a fictional story.
I don't want to go into spoilers about it, but there is a character who is trying to speak through her, basically, is what they find out. But why is this person trying to speak? What is their message? And why did they choose the person that they chose and stuff. And it's a very interesting, it kind of goes a different direction than your typical religious possession story.
Yeah, there's a reason why The Exorcist at the time was so controversial and like psychologically scarred a lot of people. Now, Emily Rose is based on a true story, but it is a much more famous case, so I don't want to get too deep into that because people probably know a lot more about that. And Stigmata is a fictional story. I don't think it purports to be any kind of true story or based on a true story, but it's a true-ish enough story because it's based on real things that happen to people all around the world all the time. As to whether or not they're legitimate miracle events, I've not witnessed it. I don't want to witness it, and I'm good over here doing this podcast talking about it a million miles away. So, yep.
Yeah, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. Instead of talking about something that people overlook, I'm going to things that are lost that people don't realize are lost. Because we have the Universal horror movies, but there's a lot of horror movies that came before that. Some of them still accessible, at least parts of them. Because James Rolfe over on Cinemassacre talks about it in several videos, that there's debates on like the old like Phantom of the Operas and like other like prints of that nature. You've got certain characters or like little set pieces that become mysteries of their own because people don't understand like narratively why they're there. And where you're filming everything on film stock, that's money. So why is it left when everything else isn't? And a lot of that comes down to is the versions we have are amalgamations of several prints because the originals were lost because celluloid is highly flammable and they are lost to fire all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just watch that Batman the Animated Series episode.
Yeah.
You know the one.
So a lot of these movies are incomplete in themselves. And a lot of the people involved with those movies are dead. So
we probably don't know what we're missing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like there were probably things that got lost in time that would be classic, nowadays, that would be on par with maybe Frankenstein and Dracula and things like that. But we'll never even know about them because they were lost in some way that they can't be retrieved.
Yeah, I can't remember what the statistic is, but it's like there's more, I think, lost silent films than that we still possess that survived today. So it's almost an entire, not just a genre of film, but like an entire catalog of history that's just gone forever. And we have certain portions, certain pieces. I think they end up finding more bits and pieces of Metropolis all the time. They're like, oh, here's another deleted scene. Do you want it? Yes. Let me gobble that up. Like forgotten lore. And so, yeah, were there any other specific movies?
Well, Phantom of the Opera is the one that comes to my mind. I guess it's like horror adjacent, at least for the time, probably.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's Lon Chaney with the makeup.
Yeah, but that's the one because I know he talked about like, I think it was that movie, The Lantern Guy at the front. Like some versions have it, some versions don't. And everyone's like wondering and debating that because some people have seen the Lantern version, some people haven't. Mm-hmm. And there's debates as to what his purpose was and what it even was. And I think it comes down to just certain additions not being complete. And I know Nosferatu was almost that way because it's loosely based on Dracula and they didn't have the permission to film that.
It only just barely got made.
Well, it got made.
Yeah.
The problem was where they made it without permission of the Bram Stoker estate, it was ordered for all versions to be destroyed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But one survived and they just kept it hidden and we found it years later. But just think there's a lot of like movie magic that goes into that with special effects that we hadn't seen before that would have been lost to time had it not been found.
Yeah.
And now that you mentioned Nosferatu, I am going to go ahead and say, did you guys see the trailer for the new one?
Oh, it's been all over my Instagram.
Yeah.
But I didn't watch it yet.
I don't know how I missed it. I didn't know there was a newer one.
Yeah, it's going to have the crow in it.
Well, no. Let's not say it that way, because I like Bill Skarsgård, and
everyone likes Bill Skarsgård. Everyone likes every member of the Skarsgård family.
The Crow was a mistake.
They're all amazing actors.
But he was Pennywise. He was Pennywise, and now he's Nosferatu, and he has already freaked me out in the trailer a little bit. And apparently, I'm going to tell a personal story with this because I've been excited about this because it's Robert Eggers who did The Witch and The Lighthouse and The Northman, and I love his work. And so when I found out he was doing Nosferatu and he was, casting Bill Skarsgård as the Count, I was very excited. And it's also got Willem Dafoe in it. Willem Dafoe's always gonna come back into the conversation. And I saw I watched the trailer a couple of times the other night when it released, and it's so gothic, it's so dark, it's so haunting. I'm very excited about it. And I had fallen asleep in the living room, and my fiance was still up playing video games and watching YouTube and stuff. And obviously, in Nosferatu, he has powers over the character that's going to be played by Lily Rose Depp, and he can mesmerize her. And Renfield, he has these mind control powers. My fiance said that I was laying there in my sleep, and that all of a sudden I just put my arm up and started making these weird sounds, and starting to raise up off of the ground, and the Nosferatu trailer came on, and he said it was like Nosferatu was possessing you, and when it went off, you just laid back down.
Are we in more danger than normal?
And I was like, apparently Bill Skarsgård version of Nosferatu is already affecting me.
Well, the film, I think I've mentioned this at some point during the course of not this particular podcast, but our tenure as podcasters, Shadow of the Vampire, which is available online to watch, but I don't know that it's in print. And I mean, I know that you can get a DVD of this. If I had seen one, I would have grabbed it. It's been that long since I've seen a copy of it available. I do not own a copy of this. And for me, part of it, just like with action figures, is the hunt. Anybody who, if you get it, you get it. If you're out there and you're just super impatient and you're like, I want a thing. Dopamine hit. Serotonin. Click, click, click. It's arrived at my door. You could get it anytime. We both broke down and went ahead and got the last day, the Inland Empire from the Criterion Collection, as soon as it came out. Because that's the Criterion Collection's, it's there. They're making it. It's going to be available. I don't have to go out and find it or hope that it's there. It just is. But there's certain other films, you either find it at a used place, like a Half-Price Books or Hayes. Is that what the one was in? I can't remember.
Yeah.
In Knoxville yeah. Or just some other random used DVD store. Or you go on Amazon or eBay and you just get it immediately, or start a bidding war and try to get it for a decent price. Shadow of the Vampire was this was always going to be coming up. It has Willem Dafoe in it. It's about John Cusack plays.
Subscribe to our podcast, Willem Dafoe.
Not John Cusack.
We
Sorry.
talk about you.
Not John Cusack. You forced me to let that hang in the air. Not John Cusack. John Malkovich, a much scarier actor. I don't know how I got those two mixed up. It plays F.W. Murnau, the director of Nosferatu, and it is a fictionalized retelling, or telling of, not retelling, but a telling of the making of the film. With Willem
Shrek.
Yeah, Willem Dafoe plays Max Schreck, who, by some accounts in the real world was just a weird guy, but an actor. In this, Willem Dafoe plays him as an insane cryptid, like Willem Dafoe actually is in real life, that is just possibly a real vampire. And if that sounds crazy, that this is supposed to be what really happened, it sure the is. Eddie Izzard is in this, and if that doesn't sound like a trio of horror, I don't know what does.
If you've seen any of the versions of Nosferatu, or are just a fan of that
vampires at all, if you just love vampires,
this is a very original take on it, and it is brilliantly cast, and I would also recommend it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, everybody is just the right level of weird. It's not a scary movie. It's just super up, and you're thinking
it's off-putting in a sense.
John Malkovich sure the is off-putting. I'll tell you that right now. I don't know if you've ever seen him dance. He doesn't in this movie, to my recollection. I'm just saying, that's a thing that happens in real life, and John Malkovich is a scary individual. And if he happens to hear this, big fan. So please leave me alone. Please, no offense. I'm weird too. I get it. I'm off-putting, John. Okay? Are we good? Okay, all right. So it's got a weird ending. It's and I think it's just fits in with it, gothic. You could turn this silent too. You could turn the sound off, and that's one of my. I love to keep pointing this out. Every I've been watching some Batman the Animated Series lately, and they're almost just like Greek tragedies. I noticed something at the very beginning of the series. I don't think this continues on, or at least in every episode, but for the first several stories, there's always two villains. There's the comic book insanity villain that has some tragic thing that happened to them that caused them to be the way they are, even if it's not fully explained, like Catwoman's origin story is not fully explained. And then there's the over-the-top corporate villain that's a threat to actual society. Batman has to thwart, you know, like the over-the-top comic book villain, but he has to defeat the real villain of the story, which is land use or mobsters putting drugs on the street or something. Whereas, like, the other guy might just be, you know, like, I'm crazy out-of-work actor because my face got up and somebody put chemicals on me and now I'm meaner than I used to be and I don't mind killing people. And Batman's like, I can help you, but the other guy, he's going down. I mean, like Mr. Freeze he worked for some corporation. His wife was in a coma or something, so he has to freeze her, and then the owner of the company is like, you're spending too much money, shut all this down and get some chemicals on you. But you could turn the sound off on each one of these and you would not miss a plot point or a beat, and watch it without audio. And I think that's an amazing thing to have as a storytelling feature. You can do a lot of Tim Burton movies that way, and some might say, like, well, it's because they're simplistic and children can understand it. That's what I don't necessarily think something overcomplicated and pretentious makes something a better piece of art. I think sometimes if it is something that conveys its story properly, it can be conveyed in multiple different avenues. And I think Shadow of the Vampire is one of those things. Now, the reason I bring this up is because silent films are inherently, like, off-putting and weird and difficult to watch because of the nature of filming it. They had to hand crank a lot of these. They didn't have motorized camera equipment. So it's difficult to, like, keep a steady speed, like, at perfect. I'm talking like metronome perfect. So that's why people move in such a weird fashion back then, because it's human error. Like, they can't keep a perfect stream of their arm just cranking the machine, the film going nonstop.
Not to mention that editing was literally just splicing the film together.
Like cutting and taping, literally just film. So that's why things sometimes look janky and it's otherworldly to watch. A year ago, I was lucky enough to attend in Louisville a screening of Nosferatu with a live orchestra. That was pretty cool. I love a lot of different genres in the silent film, from the silent film era, and I think that I think sometimes I see a bit of a resurgence. I don't know if it's just one of those, like, I'm going to dress like a little old lady because that's what's cool now sort of thing. So people say they're watching silent films. I don't know. I'm not calling anybody specifically out. I'm just saying I hope that if it does come back into fashion, that people actually do take the time to sit down and watch long-form media.
Yeah, and if you've seen, Nosferatu and things like that, also check out, like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and what was the other one? The Somnambulist.
No, that's in the cabinet.
Oh, is that? Yeah. What was the other one? There was another one that was from that era. But yeah, the old silent films, the old German expressionist films, like, dig into some of those and you'll see a lot of inspiration for things that came later. The building blocks of
Tim Burton especially.
Yeah, he's been influenced significantly by a lot of this stuff. I think M is about a guy who, like, murders children. That's kind of a suspense thriller of the time. But yeah, and I mean, we have, like, they're all out there, but, like, go to any DVD store or whatever and try to look up a silent film section or see what they got. We're just a stone's, and maybe this is hyperbolic, but I feel like a lot of this, we're a stone's throw away of losing this media. And you think about the movies you have on your shelf right now, the movies you own, and then think about, like, well, I don't need to own those, like my favorite movie, I have it on Amazon. One click and the internet is gone, or these databases are wiped clean or whatever, I'm just saying, what if that were to happen and the media is just gone? It's like somebody out there has it. It does exist, but Jeffrey Combs made, I keep mentioning this because it's one of my, it's one of those, like the Batman, the new Batwoman movie that got made and is never going to be released, and maybe at some point, but it had Michael Keaton. He got paid for that. He played Batman one more time, and they're just not releasing it because they don't feel like it, because it's probably bad. And then John Cena made a movie about the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. I'm like, was he animated? Is it like a Roger Rabbit thing? I don't know. And we're not gonna know because Warner Brothers just decided we don't have to release it. Jeffrey Combs made, it was filmed and like An Evening with Poe. This is the actor who played Edgar Allan Poe in, arguably like the best version of Poe, the Black Cat from Masters of Horror. And it's pretty out there. It's pretty available.
It's on Tubi, so you can stream it for free.
Yeah, go watch this right now. It's pretty. It's like it blends fiction and like Edgar Allan Poe's stories and poems with a fictional telling of his life with probably the most accurate biographical film of his life. And it all blends together so well. And so anyway, I wish they would redo The Raven or whatever with Jeffrey Combs before he gets like way too old to do it. Having said that, he also did like An Evening with Poe, which was like a one-man stage play show where he plays Poe, but it was filmed bad and he wouldn't let it be released. Now, I got to meet I think I've told this story before on here. I got to meet Jeffrey Combs at a horror convention one time, and he was so nice and personable, came out from around his table because he didn't have a line, so we just talked for a few minutes, and I asked him, and he was like, it was like filmed on different cameras, that like it was bad, and I was like, no, I don't know. I just want to see it. I don't give a if it looks bad. Like, if you've done some of the best work of your life as Poe, I want to see it. So, yet again, I reach out to the public here. If there's a way that you know of, again, if I probably mention this every other episode, because I just want to see it. So if you have it and you want to share it in a legal way that's legal, there's loopholes for everything. Okay? I'm just saying, if there's a legal way. Jeffrey, if you're listening, just release it. Just, let your, finger slip on the button. Oops, boom, I accidentally put that on YouTube. Okay, we'll all watch it, and we'll be better for it. Just, it's infuriating. It's also the same with, a lot of magic specials. Magicians famously even film Broadway runs of their performances. Never do anything with it. It's never released. It's just, put together a trailer or bits and pieces for documentary or something, but the full thing is not released. Just want to view things. So, Shadow of the Vampire, good film. I think it's available on Amazon, maybe Prime. I'm not 100% sure.
But piggybacking off of what you said earlier about either getting in bidding wars or looking for the hunt, Dead Alive is one of those that I've been trying to find. And that's one of those two folds on trying to find, because it's not on streaming. I've not been able to find a physical copy. And even if you did, it's not the full cut, because for some reason, it was never... There's 30 minutes missing from the American version of it. It was cut, never shown here.
What?
Yeah.
I had a copy. I don't know if I still do. I'll have to dig through. And see.
Was it on VHS?
But I had the version that was called Brain Dead.
Yeah. I think the reason they changed it is because here in America, there's already a movie called Brain Dead, which is a completely different movie.
Now, before you go on, tell them who directed.
It's Peter Jackson.
Who also directed
Lord of the Rings.
Yes. And this movie is
bad shit crazy.
Yeah.
Zombies and Sumatran rat monkeys that are made out of claymation. Yes, it's a classic. I love it. And features one of my all-time favorite one-off characters, the priest.
Who says?
And he has a very Robin Leach voice. And during the zombie attack, he gets out there and he's fighting, and he's like, "I kick ass for the Lord."
So was this an Australian? Did he make this in Australia before he'd gone mainstream, or was it New Zealand?
New Zealand, maybe.
Maybe. This was his second movie, if I remember correctly. I don't think it was his
very
first.
very low budget. And I remember seeing an interview where he talked about taking over his mom's house and using her oven and things to to bake props and things. And it was just done with like whatever materials they could find and throw together. And it was done on a very low budget, and it's crazy. I remember seeing it years and years ago.
But if
and
you have
I
the
will
brain
look.
dead version, you might have the full version then.
I don't know. I'll have to look for it. But yeah, it's a very campy zombie kind of flick, and it has some really very strange things in it, I will say. And I used to watch it all the time with our old friend Donna. Me and this girl named Donna used to try to find the craziest horror movies that we could find, and we would rate how cheesy they were and stuff, and and that was one of our go-tos. We loved that one because there's literally a part after, because the Sumatran rat monkey is the one that starts the whole zombie plague, and there's a part when after he attacks this one lady and her face is starting to fall apart that she's trying to super glue her face back on.
Well, good luck finding that.
Yeah.
We may have to do a commentary screening.
Now I have to look for that today. I'm gonna make it my mission to look for, see if I still have a copy of that.
Was it on DVD though? Or
Okay. Yeah, it was a DVD.
Yeah, because everyone that I know that's talked about it says that to get the full version, like they had to go online and find it on like a German market and like purchase and pay like extra for it. Because I don't remember the reasoning, but yeah, like 30 minutes was cut from the American release and was never put on DVD here.
And that was Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Who made Lord of the Rings. Like, if you can't watch this right now, I'm not saying like go torrent it or whatever. Just go to YouTube. Watch a Lord of the Rings trailer. Just Fellowship of the Rings, the original, just 30-second or minute-long trailer. And then go find a trailer that somebody's put together of Dead Alive or Brain Dead, whichever one you can put. Just make sure it's the right thing.
Yeah.
And Peter Jackson.
Zombies.
And
claymation.
If you think
you'll know what it is.
You're struggling as an artist to like get that breakthrough. You're like, man, my stuff sucks. I'm never gonna get better. Maybe I should give up. Don't give up. Because Peter Jackson made Dead Alive, and then he made The Lord of the Rings. Okay, I'll just let that sit with some people. You might be listening and you're like, it can't be that bad. It's worse than what's in your head. I promise you. Okay, so go do that. Just look at it. Like, listen to the rest of this podcast. Or get another device. And while you're listening to the rest of us and hitting like and sharing it and subscribing it, just hit the subscribe bell and turn on the notifications. We only post like every 2 weeks. You're not going to be notified that often. It really helps out the channel. Tyler needs more coffee.
Some would say less, but...
You want us to not sound like we're on NPR? Oh, we'll turn it up. But you have to subscribe first. Okay, Becky, you go again, because I've got shockingly little to say.
I think I'm going to skip around a little bit and talk about some older things. There's a movie called Magic.
Oh, yeah, that was going to be one I was going to talk about.
Oh, yeah, okay. 1978, Anthony Hopkins, and I also have this movie. Have a DVD of this movie. He's a ventriloquist, and he is quite good at it, but he doesn't believe in himself, and he has a lot of insecurities. And the puppet is his way of like having more bravado and personality and stuff. But when he gets a big break, he chokes on it, and he goes back to his hometown and reunites with an old flame, his old love the one that got away basically, and he's trying to rekindle things with her. But the puppet has a different ambition than his so-called master. And then there's the struggle of like which one of them is really in control, and which life do they want? Do they want the the famous life, or do they want the quiet life with love and happiness or whatever? And it's very interesting. And Anthony Hopkins, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
With him.
I found this one interesting because it's like he's like a struggling magician at the front. He tries to do like these like open mic things. He just can't get anyone to pay attention to him until he gets the doll.
So what you're telling me is I need to get a ventriloquist dummy doll that's evil, a la The Simpsons and Twilight Zone, not in that order, and just get it up there with me?
I didn't want to bring that up, but...
Did you not?
No.
It really seemed really specific.
But just the things you tell me about, like, your struggles of trying to perform.
Yeah,
like
where apparently the phone screen is more interesting than someone who can read minds 5 feet in front of your face. I didn't know. Maybe I should just get on TikTok.
But the first, like, 20 minutes of the movie, 15 maybe, just feels like some of your stories.
Yeah, it doesn't help, too, that Anthony Hopkins is also on the spectrum. So... I wasn't going to mention that. You kind of brought it up, drawing the similarities between me and Anthony Hopkins. Scene dancing.
Hey, there are much worse people to be compared to.
Yeah. All right. Leave the silence here. Leave that. Do not cut that. If you cut it, don't cut this line, because then people will be like, man, how long were they silent? That wasn't that long.
This is one that's more overlooked, maybe hard to find in the wild if you want a physical copy.
I would say extremely hard.
It is,
Unless you're me.
but it is available for streaming, and pretty much any of the free streaming platforms have it. Tubi has it, Plex has it, and I'm pretty sure Prime has it, although that one is a paid, but it's out there.
We should keep a database checklist of topics that we've gone into heavily, because I can't remember. This is one of the things that I was thinking about mentioning, and there were two that are kind of from around the same time. One of them is supernatural, one of them is not, but this one, I don't think it's unknown, and I think it's pretty available, but I think that people don't talk about it as much, even though it had two of the biggest stars from that era, and also today, Jeff Bridges, let that sink in, and Tim Robbins.
I know where you're going.
Who was in... Yeah, because you mentioned it yesterday. Tim Robbins, the star of Shawshank Redemption, arguably the greatest movie of all time. So, you've seen him, you know him, you love him. He's got a heart of ice, even when he's a good guy. Is he in this? Who knows? It's Arlington Road. The, most scarring psychological thrill. I mean, maybe not. You know, your mileage may vary, like all these movies that we're mentioning. Some of which you might be like, it's whatever. I watch Faces of Death. Well, you know what? Hit like, share, and subscribe. And good for you. I won't watch this film a second time. I remember the day that I watched it. I remember where I was. And I was suffering from a lot of anxiety at the time that would have contributed to it. But it's like when you're in this no-win situation and people control the game. And they can be so narcissistic that it feels like they have supernatural magical powers. It's like, you can see through this bullshit. You know exactly what's happening. And then the stepdad comes up and puts his arm around your neck and straightens up your shirt and dusts you off and is like, hey, champ, what's going on, buddy? And you're like, you just punched me in the chest. That's what the going on. And your mom's like, oh, you two roughhousing again. And you're like, no, he's evil. Why can't you see that? That's not the plot of the film. I'm saying that's the sort of scenario that is infuriating to watch again and again. Yeah, because it's the most real thing that happens to people. Yeah,
because it's like everything seems so normal. And when you are trying to, you kind of have that suspicion of like, something's off here. But this person has everybody so snowballed that you seem like the crazy one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the worst part, is that, you go into work day after day, and it bothers you. But, who, bullshit doesn't bother? A sociopath. They can say and do anything they want with impunity. And while you're, twitchy, and you're like, hey, yeah, I mean, sure, it's fine. And then... people are like, what's wrong with this guy? Am I right? And you're like, no, but I'm right. Don't you see? Don't you see? And while they're carrying you off in a straitjacket, he's just back there, grinning and winks at you. And you're like, no! no, it was him the whole time. And then you have to bust your way out of an ambulance, wait, hold on, never mind. So see Arlington Road, it's scary and hopefully not reminiscent of something that happened in your life.
Yeah, it is one of those ones that when I go back and think about it, because it's one that I always recommend to people if they like a good, psychological, something that's more rooted in reality. If they're like, I don't like zombies and ghosts and things, I like things that are more rooted in reality. Arlington Road is at the top of my list every time because I don't have reactions to movies most of the time. I'm so desensitized. I grew up with it. So there's very little that will actually have any impact on me. But that was one that I remember having a visceral reaction to and like an actual physical reaction to. It gets your adrenaline pumping. It makes you sympathize so much with the characters. And yeah, it's one that will stick with you. It's one that will affect you while you're watching it, and it will stick with you for long after. So if you haven't seen it, definitely put it at the top of your watch list.
Joan Cusack was in that one.
Not John Cusack, but Joan, his sister, who is, I think, the weirder of the two. Although the Cusacks are like the Arquettes. Which family is weirder?
I think the Arquettes.
Yeah.
I think that one's, I think he edges that one out when he got into wrestling.
This is almost like when they asked the Culkins who would win in a fight versus the Skarsgårds. They're like, have you seen them? Them, obviously.
They descend from Vikings. Like, the Culkins are just crazy.
Yeah, I remember the meme that went around, because I am a Culkin fan, and I remember the meme that went around, and it was like, get to know your Culkins, and it was like saying, Kieran Culkin is the one that kind of dresses very hipster and has more fashion and stuff, and then it was like, Rory is the one with the good hair, and then it was like, Macaulay, and then it was like, well, if you don't know who Macaulay Culkin is, I don't know how to help you.
I'm not sure where to go. Because Magic was going to be my next one.
Oh no!
Oh,
I'm
no,
sorry,
no.
I stole that
Was
one.
there
We
anything
should
else that
have.
you wanted to say
We should
about
have
it?
conferred before, but
No.
it's good that we have crossover because it shows that we're.
Other than go and watch it, but one that I just thought of that I didn't realize was a hard to find media because I've owned the physical copy for so long, but 28 Days Later apparently is hard to find.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a
Confession?
weird one to me.
Yeah.
because
I've never seen it.
It's really big.
Well, see, that's why I was surprised because 28 Weeks Later is on streaming fairly often. You see it pop up, but the first in that isn't. And so I wonder now if they're going to do some reprints or if it's just going to be one of those that people are going to be scrambling to find because they're finally making 28 Years Later. And I don't know if they've started work on that or if they finished the principal photography on it, but it's the original director and writer coming back for this one. So that's one that kind of surprised me. But a bunch of people talking about not being able to find the first in that series.
I didn't know that, but that's one I hear people talk about that I've never seen. So,
Well, what else do you have, Becky?
well, I know we've talked about Anthony Hopkins, and there was another film that he was in 1977 that is another one that I think very few people are aware of, and it was called Audrey Rose. This one is interesting to me because, again, it delves into a subject that a lot of people have a base knowledge of, but probably don't spend a lot of time thinking about, and you don't see explored very often in the movies, and it's reincarnation. Because it basically centers around this man who lost his daughter in a car accident, and then he's been very grief-stricken and kind of like, what happens? Do these people just blink out of existence? Do they go to some other realm? Do they get to come back? What happens? And then he meets this couple and they have a daughter and he's like, no, this is my daughter. She's reincarnated and this is my daughter. Some things start to happen that seems to verify that. And it becomes like an experiment. She becomes an experiment of is she really this person or is she just inhabiting this new body, but she's really this person that died? And it gets into all kinds of ethical questions with that. It was a really good, I remember the first time I saw it, it was one that it had more emotional impact, I would say, which is a different kind of horror. It's more
I remember
empathetic.
watching this, but I don't remember how it ends. You don't have to spoil it.
No, I
here
don't
for
want to spoil it for
who-
people, but I will say, it's one of those things that you feel so torn and you feel so much empathy and sympathy for the characters and like the ethical questions of this kind of thing.
I'll have to look that one up. I don't think I've seen that.
Well. Okay, so I want to take a minute and talk about a piece of media that's very easy to find. It's in theaters right now, and it's called Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Because I didn't want to mention this, and I didn't want to wait. I didn't want to mention this in a separate thing, and I didn't want to wait until after Halloween. But I gave this a largely unfavorable review. This is one of my first favorite films. Not Beetlejuice, but the original Beetlejuice. Everyone seems to love this film. And I'm not saying that has changed my perception of it. It's just made me think, was I too harsh on this? Because I had this built up in my head. Like, I had this personal connection to the original movie, and I just wanted specific things out of this to the point where it wasn't perfect. So I judged it harshly, and Becky was not here for our review. So could you give us a few of your thoughts about this? Because it hasn't made me really, I'm just happy that people did like it. I wasn't mad. I wasn't like, people like this piece of garbage. No, I was like, it was okay. I just didn't love it. And then a lot of people, and it's done really well with its numbers. Not like blow away box office. I think it kind of did, because I didn't think people really expected it to do that well at all. So any money was good and kind of above expectations. But beyond that, a lot of people gave it really positive reviews because they were going into it thinking, fun, weird horror movie. Some people have turned this into like an existential analysis of Tim Burton's career and how like he's back, baby. And it's also like kind of an allegory for his whole life and career, and how that's complicated, and I don't want to get into that, and I don't remember the names of the essayists that have written this, so I don't want to get into plagiarizing their work, talking too much about it, but basically how Tim Burton at some point in the mid to late 90s just started going for projects that made him money and really just started seeming dead inside. Even the ones that should have been good weren't, to the point where it's like, I never saw Dumbo, but Dumbo's kind of like his, this crescendo of mediocrity. And then going into Beetlejuice, which is like an amazing success. Again, this is one of those things, like if you go into Avengers Endgame and you have it written in your head, this is exactly what they should do. I know exactly what they should do. And they do the opposite. You're going to feel let down or disappointed if it doesn't match your expectations. That's kind of what happened with me in this. Not exactly, but a lot of it was just like the jokes didn't land for me. Having said that, seeing that everyone really appreciated this and loved it, it's made me want to go back and see it again. And so I have not done that, but I just need to find the time. So, your thoughts on Beetlejuice?
Okay.
Especially having had a few weeks to absorb it and see what other people thought and said about it.
See, I think I'm kind of on the opposite side of the coin just a little bit from what you are, because if I sit there and I go into critical thinking mode and I pick it apart and I analyze it, I can find a lot of things wrong with it. Mm-hmm. It's very convoluted.
Yeah.
It tried to do too much. It did not have focus. That's a severe criticism. They have she could be like a top 5 character of all time for me in Dolores. And she basically gets built up and then tossed aside and is a side point when she should have been more of a main arc. They did not effectively use Winona Ryder in this movie. She really is like a husk of herself and her character in this. So yeah, it has a million things that I could criticize about it and find disappointing. But in the moment, being in the theater and watching it, and I have only seen it the one time, it did feel magical. Like, it brought me back into that world of Beetlejuice. It has charm. It has the visual elements. It was really fun. There were elements of it that were very hokey and campy, but I feel like that's what Beetlejuice is. And I felt good when I left the theater. And there is a scene where whoever decided to use the MacArthur Park song and have that musical sequence. And MacArthur Park, interestingly enough, when I looked it up, because that song, like when I was watching that musical sequence in the theater, I was so enchanted with it. It just instantly, I was like, okay, this is my new thing. And I went home and I asked Alexa. I didn't know the name of the song, so I just started saying the lyric, and it figured out what song I was talking about, and it played MacArthur Park, and it said Richard Harris. performed by Richard Harris. So I was like, Richard Harris? Dumbledore? OG Dumbledore?
Yep.
And then I looked it up, went down the rabbit hole, and yes, MacArthur Park was originally done by Richard Harris, the Irish actor who played Dumbledore in the first Harry Potter film. That within itself is just a crazy pop culture moment. And then it was covered by Donna Summer.
Yeah,
it kind of became like a disco-y, kind of a disco-y version of it. Mm-hmm. This Beetlejuice movie has such charm in those moments, those musical moments, those like just the essence of the Tim Burton aesthetic.
Yeah, and I think
the quirky cast. And there were some, things that I think I do have criticisms of. I did not like Justin Theroux.
Yeah.
In his role. I felt like there were so many other actors that could have made that character more interesting. I felt like Justin Theroux was a bad choice for that particular character.
Or just increase the amount of time they gave Dolores, decrease the amount of time they gave him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's one of those situations where they were having a lot of fun on set, but it didn't translate to what was put on into the movie.
Yeah, and Jenna Ortega was spot on for this. I think a lot of people criticize, she's too spot on for it because she's Wednesday or whatever, and she's playing this kind of similar character. But I think she fit into that Tim Burton world so perfectly. But her character, the side story that they give her character, kind of overtakes the middle and latter part of the film. And I think that should have been saved for a different film or something. I think this one should have just focused more on Beetlejuice and Dolores and kind of that whole world, because that afterlife world is so interesting and we don't get enough of that. We get too much of this world and not enough of that world, and that's where the really interesting stuff is. So I do get the criticisms. I don't think it is as good as the first film. I don't think it's even, close to being as good as the original, because the original was more focused and contained. It was still quirky and fun, but it wasn't so just everything in the kitchen sink,
Yeah.
But I still love this movie and do want to buy it because it hits those nostalgia points and it's just so charming and so fun. And if you can just have fun with it, I think that's so rare these days. When we watch movies, it's just not fun most of the time. Yeah, and this one, I walked out like feeling happy and feeling nostalgic and feeling enchanted. And that's so rare. So that's why I like it. But I feel like if I did go back and watch it again, those points would drag. Like
or maybe less so. Maybe less so. Maybe you just enjoy it more. I don't know.
I feel like sometimes something has an initial charm, and then if I go back and I'm not being wowed by those charming effects and I'm paying more attention to the story, it loses. But it happens the opposite way sometimes too, because I love the Scream franchise, as everybody knows. I'm the Scream queen. And when I saw the original Scream 2022, was it? I think. But it's really Scream 5. But they just called it Scream again, just called it Scream, which is confusing. But it was when Radio Silence took it over after, long after Wes Craven had died. And there, 12 years maybe after Scream 4 or something like that. There was a pretty big gap. And I walked into that theater, like, oh my God, because I'm such a Wes Craven stan. And I was like, are they going to kill my favorite franchise? Are they going to, am I going to hate it now? I walked out after seeing that movie the first time, not knowing really how to feel, because I was like, oh my God, this was kind of like Scream, but it was kind of different. And I'm a little disappointed. I don't know how I feel about it. And I think I was just trying to take it in that first time. And then I was like, okay, before I judge it too harshly, I'm going to go back and see it again. And then the second time I watched it, it had the opposite effect, because I was able to see the new elements that they brought in and still see those nods to Wes Craven's work and how they kind of bridged those two worlds. And then I liked it better. So that was one where my opinion became more favorable on a second viewing. But I've also done the opposite and been initially charmed by something and then go back and see it again and see all the flaws. So I don't know what it would be with Beetlejuice.
Okay, you did fall into my trap, because for the most missing of all missing media ever, I have some headcanon for you. okay? Because you mentioned Jenna Ortega playing Wednesday. I think every iteration of the Addams Family is iconic in some way. I have not seen every piece of Addams Family media. That would be borderline impossible because there's so much. But I was at a ball recently. That's still a thing. And yeah, I did dance. I did a little bit of Jenna Ortega's infamous dance from the show that everybody saw on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, or the show itself if you saw that. Then I started thinking about the famous missing dance from reality called The Monster Mash. There is a song released in 1962 called The Monster Mash. And, you know, much like Thriller and Tribute, we don't know what the Monster Mash really was. This is only a song about watching it. It's not the song or the dance itself. Having said that, not Richard Adams, different author, Charles Addams created the Addams Family in 1938, possibly even some sketches like predating that for the New Yorker, and continued making comic strips featuring the Addams Family until the late 80s. They would go on to, in the 60s, 64, they started the Addams Family show, which was, you know, in a lot of people's minds for a very long time was the most iconic version of them until the movies featuring Raul Julia and Angelica Houston, and obviously Christina Ricci as Wednesday, who reprised her acting in the new Wednesday show, but not as that Wednesday. Yeah. I thought that was a really cool nod to that. Here's what I present unto you and the world at large. Wednesday's dance in the Wednesday show, Wednesday, Netflix, that she does at their school dance is in fact the Monster Mash. That the monsters were doing in the chorus.
Well, let's analyze the lyrics. They did the mash. They did the monster mash. They did the mash. It was a graveyard smash. And that did go viral, so I guess you could consider that a graveyard smash.
Yeah, and if you've seen the dance, I mean, like, there's also a lot of people mimicking the dance online, too. If you want to just look at the dance, look up the dance, it's fantastic, okay? And if you want to get attention on a ballroom floor, I have no better way, unless you can actually moonwalk. If you can moonwalk across there, I promise you people will make way for you. But if for some reason you are not Michael Jackson, I am not. This is does take some choreography to learn, and I'm not going to say I did it perfectly or the whole thing start to finish in sequence, but I had fun and embarrassed my fiance.
I think that someone needs now to do a Thriller choreography versus Wednesday choreography. That would be interesting because I'm a Thriller stan. I've said before on this podcast, Thriller is probably what turned me into a super fan of all things spooky. And Thriller still tops for me. So, but I would love to see that versus, you know, someone doing some Thriller choreography versus someone throwing out this monster mash that Wednesday does.
Or just a dueling dance back and forth. No. Like a whole crowd doing a portion of the Monster Mash. In my head, I'm going to go ahead and just say it's not the Wednesday dance. It's the Monster Mash. Wednesday was doing the Monster Mash. Okay. The ultimate lost media. Did it ever exist? Yes.
Well, then even further lost is what's the song? Because the song that we know, the Monster Mash, is based off the dance, the Monster Mash. It was based off of a song, Monster Mash. Yeah, that we don't know.
That may be lost to time as Charles Addams.
But I think Ted did a whole bit about that too.
Departed this mortal coil. And I suggest that we have a special meeting of whatever our specific group of three is called on the midnight of a full moon with a Ouija board to contact Charles Addams, because I think he knows some information about this. Will we find out if ghosts are real? Does Charles Addams want to talk to us? I don't know.
Maybe, and we'll try Harry Houdini too, because he didn't come through at any of the seances that they had to try to get him to communicate. But maybe he'll come through for us.
But his wife eventually said, I can't remember how many years she did it every Halloween, but eventually she said, this is enough time to wait for any man, and eventually gave up on it. I'm like,
but wouldn't that be like a dick move? Like you're in the spirit world and you're dearly departed, and the person that's trying to contact you, and you just don't show up for them, and then years and years later you come through for some random 3 weirdo podcasters.
What if it's just what if it's like the bureaucracy of the Beetlejuice universe is really what?
Or maybe he didn't come through because he's a skeptic. He was always a skeptic. He was always debunking it, and he was like, "Hey, this is my way of proving to you that it's not real."
Like I'm such a dick.
I'm being a skeptic,
but I'm not gonna prove this. I spent my whole life trying to prove it wasn't real. Or that, I mean, he did actually spend a lot of time trying to contact his own mom, and he was one of the people who wanted it to be real if it's real, but he was debunking charlatans. He would show up and say, like, I know your tricks. They're the same kind of things that I do in a magic performance. Darren Brown. Anyway, I'm not saying he doesn't say it's real. He says he uses showmanship.
Yeah, I feel like our attempts would probably be more like that skit. Is there any spirits here that wish to speak to us? No. So there are spirits here, but they don't wish to speak to us.
Correct. Blow out the candles. Maybe also, it's like the bureaucracy of the Beetlejuice universe, and he just had his lines crossed, and he was just really freaking out some teenagers somewhere out in the Midwest, and, Bess is nudging on the planchette, and they're like, he's not in Vegas, and he's out somewhere, like, speaking Yiddish, and they're like,
and maybe the afterlife is really hard to navigate, and you can't necessarily go where you want to go. You get circumvented to other places.
Or you get stuck in the waiting room.
Yeah.
I really do wish we have a list. I can't go back and listen to like every episode that we've ever had, and I forget what I've talked about and what I haven't. The last movie that I was really thinking about, and this is another one that I feel like is kind of slept on. I don't actually think that it's all that hard to find either. And I do have a copy, and I think it's actually not too hard to find even a DVD of it. I don't know where it's streaming, but Frailty, which is a really good Matthew McConaughey movie. What's the other guy who's in that? But
Bill Paxton was in it.
Yeah. So
R.I.P. Bill Paxton. True legend.
Maybe it's just psychological thriller. Maybe it's supernatural. Maybe demons are real. Maybe they're not. And it deals with like law enforcement, but like the law enforcer has taken it upon himself to kill. He believes that he's killing demons, but it's presented in one of two ways throughout the film that you could look at this objectively.
Open to interpretation, yes.
Which is, he's just like deranged and thinks that he's killing demons, but he's really just murdering people. Or he really is killing demons, and he really has been given a mission from God to do this with. Which is it? And what is really going on? I was recommended this by a friend that I actually reconnected with just last night, like 20 years ago, and I was like, bro, that is not my kind of movie. And I watched it, and it's great. So much so that I do have a copy in my collection.
Yeah, I do love that movie too. It's always one to go back and revisit that I can solidly recommend.
Yeah.
And one last one that I want to throw in, because this one is one that it's always on my go-to list. House of the Devil. It was made in 2009 by Ty West, who is in the vernacular now because of things like Pearl and X, stuff like this. But this was earlier work from him, House of the Devil, and it is in that vein of like those 1970s satanic cult kind of movies like Rosemary's Baby and all of that. But even though it was made in the 2000s, it has a very 1970s, 80s vintage vibe about it. And it follows this young girl. I believe she may be a college student. I can't really remember, but she's in dire straits money-wise. And she sees this ad to house sit for these people. And it pays pretty well. So she was like, easy money, I'm going to do it. And then, of course, when she gets there, and they're going away for this astronomical event. You know, they belong to some weird cult and they're going for this rare astronomical event, and you know, they don't delve too much into that, and they leave the house and everything in her care, and it becomes very obvious, but it's a slow burn. Just these weird things start happening once she's there, and she realizes, oh wait, this is not easy money. There's something not quite right going on here. And it's a very slow burn, vintage kind of cult classic movie that I don't think very many people are aware of. But I saw it. I instantly fell in love with it. I always recommend it to people. If you can find it, if you can get a copy of it, it's definitely worth checking out if you like those kind of 1970s feel satanic panic kind of things.
Yeah, it looks so convincingly old that it's weird to watch, because like I didn't know it was modern. Like they did such a good job with that. You could, I think, just tell somebody this is some lost film that you haven't heard of. They haven't heard of it
from the
because
70s
it's new,
or something, yeah.
But that it is that old, and you could fool a lot of people. That's how well they did what they were going for. I remember that. I remember watching it, and I remember the look and feel of it. And I remember kind of how it ended. I don't remember the whole thing, but it definitely does.
And I'll be honest and say that I don't even remember who the lead actress is, but one of the side characters is Greta Gerwig, who went on to become a director and direct Barbie and all that. But in this, she plays this quirky side character, and she was one of the main things that I liked about it initially, was like I really liked her character, and I thought, like, this chick's really cool, who is she? And it was Greta Gerwig. But yeah, the movie it takes like these twists and turns, because it is a slow burn, and you're kind of with that character as she realizes the predicament that she's in, and it has these moments that just hit you out of nowhere because it's such a slow burn, and then something will happen and you'll be like, oh my God. So yeah, that one is definitely worth checking out if you like that whole satanic panic era or genre.
And what do you say, wrap up there?
I think so. I think this makes for a pretty good Halloween spooktacular. I think we covered a lot of stuff that people can last minute. I don't know when this is gonna air, but there still should be time before actual Halloween. So we hit you with some music, some TV, even old-timey newspaper comic strips somehow. I don't know why that came into play, but it needed to. Also, it is stated, I just want to mention, people think like I just bullshit this stuff off the top of my head with no research. Yeah, most of the time. But I did put a little bit of research into this Monster Mash theory. It was actually like Boris Karloff's Frankenstein that inspired the guy to write the Monster Mash song. Which we know is bullshit because it was like Charles Addams. Anyway, by the time this comes out, it is actually early October still. We recorded our previous episode back in May or June. It seems like a long time ago now. No, it was just like a month ago or something. But it doesn't quite feel like Halloween season yet, even though it is into October now. So Halloween month is upon us here in Chateau de Studio. What's your last name again?
That is not to be described on the
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't want to dox you.
This undisclosed location.
We live in terrifying times, but we hope that all of your scares are fun.
Can't have the people storming the bunker.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know what else to say except I hope you make this Halloween a good one.
Get your spooks where you can. Have fun with it. Enjoy spooky season. Best season.
There's so many other ideas for Halloween episodes. Yeah. We're gonna come back. We had some ideas for some spooky Christmas themed things that we don't want to give too much away about yet. But we just love talking about ghosts and scary things. Almost sucks when one of my favorite directors, Wes Anderson, puts something out and we have to spend 4 months talking about that. Even though one of our favorite directors, I feel like. And yeah, so anyway, happy Halloween.
Yeah, if you made it with us this far, thank you. I hope you enjoyed our spooky season celebration. I'm sure there's plenty more we could talk about, so if we missed something, leave it in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe, follow us on social media. Leave an extra special like for Becky for joining us for these 2 episodes. Be sure to follow us on our social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram. We'll leave links in the description below. And until next time, see you.